We're on Daf Chav Gimel Amid Beis, about 20 lines from the bottom. Shavuos Shaloi Eichel. This is on the Mishnah. The Mishnah on Daf Chav Beis Amid Beis. Toward the end of the Mishnah. Shavuos Shaloi Eichel va'Eichel Eichlin she'ein ruyin la'achila v'shas mashkin she'ein ruyin l'shia potter. If someone made a shua that he's not going to eat and he ate things that are not capable of being eaten, and he drank things that are not capable of being drunk, he's potter. The Gemara, okay. And then the Mishnah continues, Then the Mishnah continues and says, so someone who makes a shvua that he's not going to eat, and he ate nevelis and treifus, or shkatz and muslim, things that are anyway aser, he's going to be chayiv. Rav Shimon says you're potter. So now the Gemara asks, the Gemara assumes that the first thing that we said, someone made a shvua that he's not going to eat, and then he ate things that are not ru'uyim la'achila. The Gemara is assuming that's the same, talking about the same thing. It's talking about something that he's not allowed to eat, like nevelis u'trefes, skatzum or ramosim. So the Gemara asks, hagufa kasha. Amrit shvua shalei oichel va'ochel oichlin she'en ru'uyim la'achila v'shas mashken ru'uyim l'shtia potter. The first part of the Mishnah says that you're potter if you make a shvua that you're not going to eat and you ate something that you're not allowed to eat. Then we say you're chayiv. The Mishnah seems to contradict itself. Now when we learned the Mishnah, we had said means like dirt, something that's not capable of being eaten. And that's going to be the conclusion of the Gemara. But it's going to take us a long time until we get back to that. The Gemara now is going with the assumption she'ein ru'yin la'achila means something that's also to eat. So then that's the case. The next part of the Mishnah immediately afterwards contradicts it. It says yichayiv if you made a shvua that you're not going to eat nevelis treif v'shkatzim or ramasim. So Gemara, as we understand, ma'ishna reisha de pater u'ma'ishna seifa de chayiv. What's the difference between the reisha that you pater and the seifa that you chayiv? And the Gemara assumes the reason why you potter in the reisha is because when a person says shvua she'eni eichel, he doesn't. He's not referring to things that are asa to eat, things that he's not. That's not what he has in mind. He says shvua she'eni eichel. He means to say things that he could eat, but something like a nevelus or treifus that he anyway can't eat. He doesn't have that in mind when he says shvua she'eni eichel. So then, if he goes ahead and eat them, he's not going to be chayiv for being over on his shvua. So the Gemara asks, so if that's the case, why does the Sefer then say Yechayiv? Ma'ishna Reisha the Patu, Ma'ishna Sefer the Chayiv. So the Gemara Holy Kasha, Reisha Bestam v'Sefer b'Mefarsh. The Reisha is talking about where he just said Eichel. The Sefer is talking about what he said, Shua She'eni Eichel, I'm not going to eat food, and also says Shua She'eni Eichel, Treif Nevelus u'Treifus. He says, I'm not going to eat Nevelus u'Treifus. So then when he said, you can't say that he didn't mean nevelis or treifus because those are anyway not roy for him to eat. He said specifically that he doesn't eat, that he's making a shvua that he's not going to eat them. But even if he says specifically that he wants to make a shvua that he's not going to eat nevelis or treifus, that shvua shouldn't be chal. Amai mushba me'arsinayu. There's a different problem. In addition to the fact of whether or not, when he says she'eni eichel, that whether he means to include nevelis or treifus, something that's anyway awesome. Because so we alleviated that problem. I say we're talking about where he specified that he's saying he's making a shvua against nevelis or treifus. But there's still another problem that it shouldn't be a valid shvua because he's already usher in it. Mujba me'ar sinai. You can't make a shvua on something that's already usher. So since nevelis or treifus, obviously you're not allowed to eat, how can he make a shvua to say, I'm not going to eat nevelis or treifus? It should be an invalid shvua, even if that is what he intends. So Rav Shmuel Rabbi Yochanan Amri b'kel dvarim hamutar min dvarim ha'asurim. We're talking about he wasn't just mefarish and said that I'm going to eat, I'm making a shvua that I'm not going to eat nevelis or treifus. He said I'm not going to eat a regular basar shchuta, kosher basar, as well as I'm not going to eat nevelis or treifus. So since he's including it in it, something that's this kailal, he's kailal together with it, he's including together with it something that he is allowed to eat. He's saying, I'm making a shvua that I'm not going to eat a regular meal mart, sausage. And he also says, and I'm also making a shvua, I'm not going to eat nevelus or trevis, a Nathan's hot dog. So with that, the Nathan's hot dog is also going to be usher. It's going to be included together with the valid shvua. Since part of it is a valid shvua, we don't say that it's mushba b'yomid, since part of it is taking effect on something that he is able to make a shvua. That's Reb Shmuel and Rabbi Yechon's teretz. Rish Lakish says no. Rish Lakish doesn't agree with Issa Kailel. He says there's a different reason. We'll explain exactly how he disagrees with Issa Kailel. He says there's a different reason why it's a good shvua. Iyata Moitza, he says it could be talking about where a person is making a shvua just on Nevel Sutrefis. But if that's the case, it's mushba b'yomed. How can you make a shvonet? Iyata moitza. The only case you're going to find that it's going to be a valid shvua, eli iba mefarish chachi shiv aliba derabanan. According to the Rabbanan, it's talking about where he was mefarish. He wasn't just mefarish that he's making a shvua on nevelus to trevis, but he also made a shvua that he's making he's making the shvua on pachas mishir, on less than a kazayis, on a mashu. A mashu, there's no chiv midaraisa for eating a less than a kazayis of nevelu trefa. So it's really mutter. So on that, we don't have the taina that he's mushba b'yomed, less than a kazayis. There's no chiv of nevelu trefas. And Viva Stam, Ali Rabbi Kiva. And Rabbi Kiva, as we had this Gemara a couple of times before, Rabbi Kiva holds anytime someone makes a Stam Shavua on something that's Aser, when he makes a Shavua on Nevel Zutrefis, so we say to ourselves, what kind of Shavua is this? If it's going to be on more than a Kazayas, it's not going to be able to take effect because it's Mushba B'Yomed. So according to Rabbi Kiva, when someone makes a Shavua on Nevel Zutrefis, he automatically means a mashu, because otherwise it wouldn't be able to take effect. So according to Rabbi Kiva, he doesn't have to even specify that he's talking about less than a kazayas, because we can by default understand that that's what he's saying. Okay, so those are the two terutzim of the kasha. Okay, we've seen this Gemara a couple of times. We're in the bottom of Chav Gimel on the base, and we're answering the question of our Mishnah said. First, it said that Davish Einu Ru'uyin, on someone makes a shvua on something that's not roy, it's potter. And then it says, but if you make a shvua on Nevel Zutrevis, the Machlekes, the Chachamim, Chum say Yechayev, and Rav Shimon says you're potter. So Gemara is saying, how could we just said that you make a shvua on something that's Einu roy, you're potter, and now then we say you make a shvua on Nevel Zutrevis, you're going to be Chayev. How could that be? So we said, it's talking about who's a mefarish. He said specifically that he intends to make a shvua on nevelos or trevis. But the Gemara says, but it's still mushba b'yomed. So we have Rabbi Yechon and Reish Lakish's two terutzim. Rabbi Yechon says because it's iser kailul. He's been kailul the iser of nevelos or trevis, but it's on top of the fact that he's also making a shvua, saying that he's answering on himself stam food that's kosher. So kosher food is valid. So once it takes effect for the kosher part, it also takes effect for the nevel sutrefis. That's Reb Yechanan's teretz. Rish Lakish says no. The reason why it's going to be valid is not. He doesn't hold of Issachar like we're going to see. He says it's because he's making the shvua on less than a kazayas of nevel sutrefis, which will depend on whether you hold like the Chacham or Rabbi Akiva how it works. But the point is that less than a kazayas, he's not going to be chayiv midaraisa on nevel sutrefis. You don't get malchus for that, then you don't have to bring a carbon.
I apologize, Joel. Where are we up to?
Yeah. I'm sorry?
Where are we up to?
We're on the bottom of Gimel Amid Beis.
All right, thank you.
So that's what we're up to. So Zaktima. Bishlam Rabbi Yechon Amar Kreish Lakish. The reason why Rabbi Yechon who explained that why the Mishnah says, the Chachamim, the Tanakam in the Mishnah says, that you can make a Shavuos on Nevelas Utrefes, even though it's Mushba B'Yomid. He said it's because it's an Isser Kailo. It's not just answering the Nevelas Utrefes, it's also answering other things. That's the case. He doesn't say Reish Lakish, the Mukim Law. Reish Lakish had answered, they were talking about less than a Kazayas of Nevelas Utrefes. And he said it's going to depend on whether you say like Rabbi Kiva and the Chachamim, whether you say it has to be the way it's Mefarish, less than a Kazayas, or whether it's even more, even if you said Stam according to Rabbi Kiva. The Mukim Law Masis in the Divrei Akal. The reason Rabbi Yechon didn't want to say like Reish Lakish, because Reish Lakish said there's an unusual use of the phrase Divrei Akal. It doesn't mean according to everyone. It means that it's going to come out a different pshat depending on whether you're talking about Rabbi Akiva or the Chacham. Rabbi Lakish says, according to Rabbi Akiva, it's talking about where he says Stam. According to the Rabbanan, it's talking about Bedafka, where he's Mefarish less than the Kazayas. Rabbi Yechon didn't want to get into that the Mishnah is going to depend on on which Tana you hold like about what case the Mishnah is talking about. And Reish Lakish, my time Allah Amak Rabbi Yochanan. Why didn't Reish Lakish say like Rabbi Yochanan? Why doesn't he say that the reason why you can make a Shavuos on the Nevelas Utrefes is because it's an Isser Kailel? There's a part of the Shavuos that does take effect. The part that where he's saying where he said, I'm not going to eat kosher food and I'm not going to eat Nevelas Utrefes. So even though the Nevelas Utrefes part shouldn't be valid because it's Mushba V'Yomid Mehar Sinai, it's already previously Asr, but since there's a part where he's saying I'm not going to eat kosher food, that takes effect, it spreads out and allows it, it's like a migu, since it takes effect for the kosher part, it also takes effect for the non-valid part. So why doesn't he say like that? Why doesn't Reish Lakish say like that? Amalach ki amin iser kailel biser haba me'elav biser ba'aba yedei atzma yeloi amin. He says, we only say in iser kailel that something will be included. That's only if it comes on its own. And Rashi gives the example: if someone makes a shvuah that he's not going to eat, someone who's eating nevela on Yom Kippur, that the Isser of Yom Kippur, Nevela is also before Yom Kippur. When Yom Kippur comes, one might say that the Isser of Yom Kippur can't be Chal. The point of Mushba Ba'aymed V'Har Sinai is another way of saying it. The more common phrase for it is Ein Isser Chal Al Isser, right? The reason why you can't make a Shavuos on something that's already Asr is because it's already Asr. You can't have another Isser Bichal on the previous Isser. So we say, so when you have an Avela and he eats it on Yom Kippur, one might say maybe he's not going to be Mechuyev for the Yom Kippur part because it was already Asr before Yom Kippur. So we say, no, it's an Isser Kailel. Since Yom Kippur is Asering everything, it asks much more than just Nevelas. It asks him from eating everything. So it also adds an Isser to the Nevel. So that's an Isser Haba Me'elav. It comes by on its own. The person didn't decide to add it. But over here, maybe it's Isser Haba Yedei Atzma, where a person decides, in this case, where he's making a Shavuos and he's saying, I want to answer to myself. I'm not just, he makes a Shavuos, I'm not going to eat kosher food as well as non-kosher food. Now we don't give him the autonomy. We don't give him a person the authority to be making Isser Bichal Isser by adding on an extra Isser. So maybe the din of Isser Kailel only applies where it comes on its own, not where a person makes a decision to add it on. So now the Gemara moves on. Bishlam Reish Lakish. According to Reish Lakish, that he answered our question of why our Mishnah said that you're going to be chayiv for Nevelas Utrefes, where it makes a Shavuos on Nevelas Utrefes, even though we said a Shavuos that's not Roy doesn't work. He said the reason is because we're talking about less than a Kazayis. Mishum hachi kapater Rav Shimon. Then it's very, very understandable why Rav Shimon says you're not going to be chayiv for the Shavuos on Nevelas Utrefes. Why? Because the Reish Lakish's whole pshat is that we're talking about where he's not going to be chayiv for Nevelas Utrefes. We're talking about Nevelas Utrefes that are mutter, where it's less than a Kazayis. The Tanya Rav Shimon, I'm a kol shulamakas, I'm a Kazayis al carbon. Rav Shimon holds taka that Yechayev even for less than a kazayis for nevelus utrefus. So it's not going to help. According to Reish Lakish, Rav Shimon will say it's not going to help that it's less than a kazayis, that he's making a shvuah. And he's saying specifically, according to the Rabbanan or Rabbi Kiva B'stam, there's no such thing as less than a kazayis. Less than a kazayis, you also chayav for nevelus utrefus. So then it's a pure, regular iser chal iser, or like we've been saying, mushba va'omer mar Sinai. He's also on nevelus utrefus even on less than kazayis according to Rav Shimon. So that's why Rav Shimon in our Mishnah argues, and he says you're going to be pater for the shvuah. The shvuah is not going to be chal. El Rabbi Yochanan, my time of the Rav Shimon the pater. According to Rabbi Yochanan, why is there a machlekes? So we went to all this effort, the whole time now we've been trying to answer that. In our Mishnah we said davar she'eino roi, you're going to be pater, and then we say an nevelus utrefus yechayev, but that's just the Tanakama. So we said according to Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish have an argument about how to explain why the Tanakama says you're going to be chayev on nevelus utrefus, and Rabbi Yochanan said it's because of Isser Koil. But then Rav Shimon turns around. Rav Shimon in the Mishnah is chaylik on the Tanakam, and he says you're pater on nevelus utrefus. But if we're talking about Isser Koil, why doesn't Rav Shimon agree that it's an Isser Koil? If we're talking about a case where the person said specifically, I want to asa myself to kosher food as well as non-kosher food, let it be an Isser Koil. And for the Gemara, Rav Shimon l'tamei, the less lay Isser Koil. Rav Shimon doesn't hold of an Isser Koil. He holds an Isser Koil is not going to be chayiv. It's not going to take effect. The Tanya of Shimon Aimer, ha'eichel nevela b'yom kippurim, pater. Someone who eats an nevela on Yom Kippur is pater. Now, obviously, he doesn't mean he's pater for eating an nevela on Yom Kippur, but he's pater for the Yom Kippur part of it. So it all works out. According to Rabbi Yochanan, the explanation of why Rav Shimon is chaylik is because he doesn't hold of Isser Koil. According to Reish Lakish, the reason why Rav Shimon is going to be pater is because he holds that Yechayev on less than a kazayis. So this case, even if he said I want to aser less than a kazayis, it's still going to be aser off nevelus utrefus, and therefore it's going to remain pater because it's a Isser chal Isser or mushba v'omer mar Sinai. Zak Gemara, Bishlam Reish Lakish miskachas la belav v'hein. The original pasuk that tells you, it says a person can make a shvuah lahara oy lahetiv. So the Gemara on the next blot is going to tell you that a shvuah is only valid if it's capable of being not just where he says I'm not going to do this thing. It has to also be that if he says if I do this thing, it would be that shvuah would be valid. Let's see the Rashi on this. Maybe he'll just to repeat it over because it's a strange concept. So we're going to say in one more block. A shvuah does not. You don't bring a carbon for a shvuah, for a false shvuah. Unless you find for it both the possibility of not just what he said I'm not going to do, but also that I am going to do. If we were to reverse what he said, it would also be able to be a valid shvuah. It has to be both the thing, what he said the shvuah, as well as the opposite. So according to Reish Lakish, it works out well that you have lavahin. Because he made a shvuah, I'm not going to eat a chatzi shir or a mashahu of nevela, and a mashahu of nevela is mutter, so that's why it's a valid shvuah. Because if he made a shvuah that I am going to eat less than a shir, a mashahu of nevela, that would be a valid shvuah because he's allowed to eat less than a chatzi shir of nevela. El Rabbi Yochanan, bishlam Allah mishkachasla. A person says, I'm not going to eat nevela, and he's not talking about less than a shir. According to Rabbi Yochanan, we're talking about more than a shir. But the reason why it works is because we say it's an Isser Koil. He said, I'm making a shvuah that I'm going to eat both kosher. He says, I'm not going to eat both kosher and non-kosher. If you turn around and he makes a shvua that I will eat both kosher and non-kosher, that will certainly not be a valid shvua. You can't make a shvua to say you're going to do something that's not allowed. He's saying I'm going to eat treifus. That you can't make such a shvua. So this shvua, the way Rabbi Yochanan is learning the Mishnah, should fail the test that a shvua has to always be able to be reversed and still be a valid shvua. So we're going to have to explain the Mishnah like Rav. That means we're going to go back to the original question that we said that the Mishnah is talking about. Shvua shaloi oichel. That was all the way back, the original question. Before we got to Machlekes Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, we'd asked, the Mishnah first says, Davar she'ein ruyin la'achila, and we had understood Davar she'ein ruyin la'achila means something that he's not able to eat, like an aveilus or treifus. Then we said, then the Mishnah continues, and it says, Davar she'ein, that he makes a shvuah in aveilus or treifus, that's going to be chayiv. So how do we answer that? So we said, the Davar Haru'i is talking about where he just said she'ena oichel, where he wasn't mefarish specifically the veils of treifus, so he's not including that. He never meant that. So that's going to be, if he then eats the veils of treifus, it's not included in the shvuah. But and the case that we said the chayiv is talking about where he was mefarish the veils of treifus, and then Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish have their Rabbi Yochanan then explained, and it's talking about he was koil. He didn't just say specifically the veils of treifus, he also said he's not going to eat any kosher food as well. So now, but now it's going to say different shot. The Amar Rava shvua shalei oichel va'achal afar potter. He says that which we said shvua she'ena oichel davar he's potter and davar she'ena roy. It's talking about where he said he's not going to eat anything. He said stam, and then he ate offer. He ate something that's not a food. It's not edible at all. So that's where we're going to say he's potter. So then it's no stira. There's nothing to do with the next part of the Mishnah, which is talking about where he made a shvua that he's not going to eat treifus. And that could even be talking about where he made stam shvua, I'm not going to be eichel, and that includes treifus. Amar Rav Mari, afanan na mitnina. And I'll prove to you that that's what it's talking about, where he didn't say specifically, I'm not going to eat treifus. Koinim ishti nanisli. He makes a shvua. The last part, the following part of the Mishnah. The Mishnah continues and says, a man said, my wife is going to be also to me, that I'm not going to be able to be nana from her. If I ate anything today, but achal nevelus treifus shkatz and masam, and then he ate nevelus treifus shkatz and masam, hari ishter asurulay. His wife is also to him. So we're saying, so there clearly it's talking about where he didn't say, he just said he said any eichel. He didn't say any eichel nevelus treifus, because then if he said nevelus treifus and then he ate nevelus treifus, obviously it would be awesome. So tomorrow, so we see that even though a person just says any eichel, that includes nevelus treifus. So tomorrow, hachi hashta. How can you compare that case? Hasam kivin to gimi kara achal v'hader ishtabale. Since he already ate the neveils of treifus, he's making a shvua and said, I did not eat. And he had already eaten the neveils of treifus. And then afterwards he makes a shvua that I didn't eat. Chashuvei achshavei. By eating it, he's making it clear that you can't say that when he says any oichel, doesn't mean neveils of treifus, because that's something that a person doesn't eat. He already ate it. So you can't say, it doesn't make any sense. When we say stam as a person says any oichel, any chanami, it can mean he's not including offer, he's not including the neveils of treifus, because he doesn't include such things. But over here, he already ate it, so clearly he does consider it something that's edible. But in our case, there's nothing that's not a raya from the seif of the Mishnah. When a person says any eichel, he is including nevelus or treifus. But we're not slugging up the Rava's teretz. We're just saying the raya from the Sefer is not a valid raya. Amar Rava. My time at demand islay iser kailel. Why is it what's the reason for the Mandamu who says the Asa for an Isser Kail? Midi Hava Isser Moisef. Because it's similar to, everyone agrees that an Isser Moisef is going to be valid. So we say Isser Kail is also valid. So let's see the Rashi on this, because the difference between an Isser Moisef and Isser Kail is a very subtle distinction. Isser Moisef, I'll say it in my own words quickly, and then we'll look at the Rashi, we'll say it more lengthily. Isser Moisef is when you have one object, and you're saying, this thing that's usher in one way now is going to become usher in an additional way. Masha Enkin Isser Kail is when you're saying, this applies to one thing, and therefore I want it to apply to a second thing. So let's see Rashi. Midav Isser Moisef. The man the Leslie Isser Chalal Isser Kail, even according to the man who doesn't hold up Isser Kail, Islay be Isser Moisef. He will agree that an Isser Moisef does take effect. We all know this because we learned Yavamas a couple of years ago. Rabbi Yosi, who says Isser Kail does not take effect, you say Ein Isser Chalal Isser by Isser Kail, he will agree that Isser Moisef does take effect. Isser Kail, Kari Hecha, the Ein Isser Achron Moisef al Chaticha Klum, where Isser Kail is where this new Isser that we're trying to add on is not making this object any more awesome. But it's saying that the person is going to be usher in other things. What's an example? This nevela b'yom kippur. When a person eats nevela on Yom Kippur, when Yom Kippur comes, it's only ushering the chaticha in achila. The only thing that's usher the guy by this food is that when Yom Kippur comes, you're not allowed to eat it. It was already asur because it was nevela. No additional issa. There was no change in the status of this piece of meat. You couldn't eat it before Yom Kippur, and now Yom Kippur comes, you still can't eat it. It was before it was nevela, now it's nevela plus Yom Kippur. So we don't. That's an isser kail. You're just adding on a second issa that something that was already asur. Aval riba yisura, an isser moisef. The only thing that changed on Yom Kippur is that he's not just usher. Before he was also only usher nevelis, and now he's also to eat anything else. But the person changed, but the chaticha was usher beforehand. So if you're going to say an Isser Kail works, it is a good, you have to say, since it's Chal, I'm sorry? It doesn't make it into two, we say, but since the person now has additional things that are Asr, it's like a migu. Since now this person can't eat kosher things, it's also going to say the Isser of Yom Kippur will Chal on the Nevela, that he won't just be Asr al Nevela, it will also be additionally Chayv Yom Kippur, since it is taking effect to some extent. But Isser Moisef that everyone agrees with, and that's some people hold. It's a machlokes about whether that works. But Isser Moisef everyone agrees with. Isser Moisef, Isser Achon Moisef al Chaticha Atzma Davar Shlo Hayaba Ayde Isser Rishon. That's talking about where the actual object gets more Isser Asr than it was originally. But Isser HaChaticha Achon Masha Haisa Mutaras Kodesh Ba Isser Achon. That the chaticha itself becomes asur in a way that it wasn't asur before. Kegoin, what's an example? Chelev shel kodesh. You have kachim, you have a carbon. Part of a carbon is chelev. Chelev goes and is brought onto the mizbeach, it gets burnt. So achas alachol mishum chelev. Chelev is asur to eat because it's treif. We're not allowed to eat chelev. Umotu ligvoyel mizbeach, but it still can be brought onto the mizbeach and brought as a carbon. Nasa nicer, but if you wait past the time of bringing it as a carbon, it becomes nicer. Once it becomes nicer, it's no longer can be brought as a carbon anymore. Since certainly when chelev becomes nicer, it no longer can be brought in the mizbeach. So the chaticha itself in addition to being chaylev, that's usher for a person to eat, it also is now becomes usher to be brought on the mizbech. It's a chalal iser. It's not a chalal iser legabe the iser noiser on the mizbech. Chalal nami iser shem noiser etzel kol adam ha'oichlei. Therefore, the person who eats it won't just be usher for eating chaylev, he'll also be usher for eating nice. So we won't say ein iser chalal iser, since the person couldn't eat it al chaylev, he can't eat it now. The iser of nicer is not chal on it. It doesn't take effect because he's mushba v'yayimid, because this iser noiser did have an effect on the chaticha. It made it that it can't be brought on the mizbeach. So chal adam oichel l'schayev v'lo mishum chaylev v'mishum noiser. Av b'sheyesh kan iser chal al iser. So that is the difference between iser moisef and iser chaylev. And we're saying that the reason why iser chaylev works is because, according to Man Amar, he says you learn it out from iser moisef. Just like iser moisef, we don't say iser ein iser chal iser. We'll say it l'gabi iser chaylev. Manda Potter, so to continue in the Gemara, that's the explanation for the Manda Amu says Yechayev, he'll say Isser Kol is similar to Isser Maisef. But Manda Potter, the less like Kiyamin Isser Maisef, B'chad Chaticha. When do we say in Isser Maisef? That's only in the same Chaticha. But we don't say it by Gabi and Isser Kol, which would have to take effect on two separate things. But Amar Rav, Lamanda Islay Isser Kol. According to the Man Damu says that Isser Kail does take effect, and we don't say Ein Isser Chalisa. Amar Shvuah Shel Ha'echel Te'enim, because of Amar Shvuah Shel Ha'echel Te'enim Ba'anavim. Someone who makes a Shvuah first that he's not going to eat Te'enim, and then he makes a second Shvuah saying, I'm not going to eat Te'enim Ba'anavim. Miga D'chayil Ba'anavim, D'chayil Nami Te'enim. We say the Isser Kail will work. That will cause this second Shvuah to take effect. Since it's going to take effect L'gabe D'anavim, will also take effect L'gabe Te'enim. The gabi grapes will also take on the dates. So the Gemara Pshita, that's what Isser Kail is. What was the Rava adding? So the Gemara Maldatem Isser Haba Me'elu Arvinim Isser Haba Me'atzma Lo Yamrin. I might say that Isser Kail only works like the case of Chaylev and Noiser, which is an Isser Kail that comes when at the end of the day it automatically becomes nicer. But when a person makes a Shavuos where he's bringing it on himself, maybe we don't say then an Isser Kaila works. Kamashma, and that's why Rabbah added on this din where he first said a Shavuos on Te'enim, and then he said another and Te'enim, to tell you even though the person is making the Isser Kaila on himself, it's still, the Isser is going to be Chalal Isser because it's an Isser Kaila. Masav Rabbah Brei de Rab. Yesh Oichel Achila Achas B'chayev Allah Ar B'chatas. There could be a person who eats one thing and it'll be Mechuyev 4 separate chatas on it. In addition, he'll also be chayiv for one asham. You chayiv asham from Ila, so he'll also be moil and ekdesh. Be'eluhei, tamei she'achal chaylev, someone who's tamei, but we don't know what the tamei has to do with anything yet, but he ate chaylev, so chaylev is certainly one chatas. You're not allowed to eat chaylev. But who noiser, and it's left over minah mukdashim, so you have a second chatas for eating noiser, and it's mukdashim, and he was tamei, so he's eating hekdesh. He's eating kachim b'tumah, so that's a third iser. B'yom HaKippurim, and it's Yom Kippur. So he's going to be chayiv for Yom Kippur. That's going to be chayiv the asham, and also he ate from kachim, so he's chayiv mi'ila. So he's chayiv for Yom Kippur. That's a fourth chatas, and because he ate from something that's kachim, he's going to be chayiv an asham for the mi'ila. So that's how you get 4 chatayis. The chayiv for he's eating kachim b'tumah, he's eating kachim which gives him ilah, he's eating chaylev, he's eating noiser, and he's eating on Yom Kippur. Rameya Omer avim hoysu Shabbos v'yetzia chayiv. Rameya says you could add on a 6th iser or a 5th chatas if it was on Shabbos and he took it outside. Amar lo yenim Hashem. They said back to him, what are you talking about? We're talking about eating. What are you talking about carrying out? That is you could do 10 other things. You could also lend with ribbis at the same time. Well, so what does that have to do with anything? The Isa, now the Gemara says, if you say that an Isser Kail is also Mishkachas al Chomesh, I could find you a 5th carbon chatas. We leave out the asham for eating hektish. What we've really been talking about is when we talk 5, we mean a 5th chatas. You could have an additional chatas. Where he said a shvua that I'm not going to eat dates and chaylev. So by that way, he'll make on top of the 4 that we mentioned, if he makes a Shavuos Chayil, where he asks himself tomorrow, which will take effect, and he also says, I'm not going to eat Chaylev, so then his Shavuot that he's not going to eat Chaylev will take effect, because it'll be an Isser Chayil, and therefore you'll have an Isser that he's violating his Shavuot. So that will be a fifth Isser. So because we'll say an Isser Chayil. So tomorrow, no, that's not a taina that according to Rava we should have a 5th Isser. Kiktan Isser Abba Me'elav, Isser Abba Me'atzmo Yolektani. This is a little deceptive. What it means to say is that the Brisa over there, when we said there are 5 things that you're also on, or 4 things that you get a chatas on, it's only talking about things that a person comes to him without him doing anything. A shvuah where he's bringing on himself, that's cheating. We're not including that in the brisa. It doesn't mean to say we're not arguing on the idea that you can have an iser koilo on an iser haba me'atzma. What we're saying is that we're not talking over here about iser haba me'atzma. Prektumara bahari hegdish. What about hegdish? Hegdish, he brought it on himself. He said, I'm making this kachim. So Gemara, the b'chor. We're talking about a b'chor, so which as soon as it's born, it's kaidish. The glushasa mirechem, it becomes kaidish on its own. It wasn't his choice. Iba yasema, or I could say another explanation of why we didn't say the case of shvua as a 5th iser. Kiktani midi de les le she'ela. We're only talking about things that a person can't go to the chacham and undo. Shvua the isle she'ela like tani, but shvua, since he could go and take away this chatas by doing a shayla on it, we didn't include it in the list of chatois. In fact, the Mara hari hektish, but when he's makdish something, could also be shayla on it. Hakminum b'bechar. The Gemara says no, we can have the same test like we said before. We're talking about a bechar. You can't be shayla on a bechar. It's a bechar regardless. Iba Yisema, another answer of why we didn't say shvua as an additional case. Kiktani carbon kavua. We're only talking about a carbon of chatas, carbon oil b'yared like tani. If someone is over on a shvua is bita. When he says I'm answering something on myself, like I'm answering chaylev, that's a shvua. You chayiv a shvuas oil b'yared, and we're not talking about shvuas oil b'yared, carbon oil b'yared. We're talking about only carbon chatas. Carbon oil b'yared. But we said one of the isurim that we said here was someone who ate kachim, which is a betuma, which is another carbon oil b'yared. So ben nasi, we're talking about this person over here was chayiv, was a nasi. A nasi may be soyer, a nasi who comes into the Beis Hamikdash betuma or eats kachim betuma, he does not bring the carbon oil of yared. That there's a special sar that he brings, so he's not he's not excluded from the sar chatas. So he brings a regular chatas. He doesn't bring carbon oil of yared. It's not a regular chatas; it's a special chatas, but it's a chatas. It's not oil of yared. That's why it was included. Rav Ashi Amar Kiktani. Rashi says a different text. Kiktani midi dechayli kashir, kechayli kashir. Shua dechayla apachas kashir like Kiktani. We're only talking about things that could be that are only chal with a shear, with a kazayis. Shua that could be chal even on less than a shear. If a person specifies, I'm making a shua, I'm not going to eat a mashu, that certainly takes effect. So we're not including that in our list. In fact, the Mara hektish. What about hektish? We're saying that kachim is also, which there's no shear of a kazayis on hektish. No, but even kachim, even though it's true, you don't need, it doesn't go by a kazayis, but it needs a shavar pruta, so it has a shear. Rashi Ma'avira Amar Zera, he gives I don't know whatever, up to the 5th or 6th teretz. Kiktani is daine karas. Daine lav like tani. We're only talking about all the isurim that we're talked about in this brisa. What was it, a Mishnah or a brisa? I think it was a Mishnah. All these things that we said are also in the Mishnah is things that if you do it on purpose, you get karas. But things that are only a lav like tani. Tani, what about the Isser of being of Me'ilah, that he's being nana from Kodshim? That's only a Zadon Lav. So Gemara, Bechatas Kamrinan. That which we say that the Zdainai has to be Karas, that's only the things that are Chatas. But Asham, that's a separate category. That does not have to have a Lav. That doesn't have to have, I'm sorry, Karas. It could even be a Lav. Ravina gives another. It's Kitan Midi de Chayel Amidi de Barachilu. The Barachilu. Shua the Chal Amidi La Barachilu like Tani. We're only talking about things that are Chal specifically on Eichler. Isurim that are Chal on Eichler. But Shvua, that could be Chal on anything. You can make a Shvua on any object. You say, I'm not going to be Nene from a chair. That's not included. We weren't including that. A person could be makdish eitzim va'avonim to the Beis Hamikdash and then become iser mi'ilah. We only talking about things that have a substance to them. Shvur the chayla amida the less be mashasha. Like we're going to see, it's going to be in the Mishnah that's immediately following this. A shvur can be chal even on things that have no substance. Going she'ishin v'shal yishin, where a person makes a shvur, I'm going to sleep, or he makes a shvur that I'm not going to sleep. Like Tani, that was not included in the Mishnah. Okay, Yashakayach, enjoy your holiday. Enjoy the day off.